So last week, oh, you weren't here last week. Last week we talked about Dinah.
Okay. Yeah, I know her.
And yep, there was, I misspoke at the last one. I said all 12 sons had been born already, but there weren't. There were only 11 sons and then the one daughter.
Right.
And then she was defiled by
Right.
Shemuel, or I forget his name, but it starts with an
Right.
S. And in that time, if a woman was defiled, then she had no value after that. And then Jacob did
Well,
not.
he wanted to marry her.
He did afterwards.
But he did it the wrong way.
He did, yeah.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
But and then when Jacob found out what happened to her, he did not rise up to defend her. He did not go out to get her brothers or anything like that. And the other thing is, in that time, and still in some cultures, the parents would give the daughter away. So the daughter basically had no say in what she was doing. So I also did some digging to find out what happened with Dinah after this happened. And in some of the, what are they called? They're called midrash. So that's the like rabbinical genetic or exegesis writings where they've told stories about what happens that's not in the scripture, but it's passed down through tradition. And there was 3 different things that I found that may have happened with Dinah afterwards. So the first is that Simeon may have married her, and that she was the woman mentioned in Genesis 46:10, where it said that oh, there's my mom. So we're just recapping. So there's 3 things that I found that might have happened to Dinah. The first is that she might have married Simeon in Genesis 46:10. So Simeon's her brother. It says that he was the father of a child of a Canaanite woman. And the reason that they say that it might have been Dinah is because maybe she acted like a Canaanite woman, saying that maybe she provoked this gentleman. Like, you know, that whole, well, you wore a short skirt, so you were asking for it kind of thing. Or because she was buried in Canaan, that when she passed away, she was buried in Canaan. So that's the first thing, that she may have married her brother Simeon. The second is maybe she married Job from the book of Job. So that's also interesting. There's nothing to really suggest that. I think that's just something they just tied two different things. Like it says in Job that you talk as a shameless woman, and in Dinah it's because he has committed a shameless something in Israel. So the rabbis decided that
sounds like a stretch.
Yeah, it is a stretch. And then the other one, which is probably the most interesting, is that Dinah became pregnant. There, it's Shechem. I can't do it. I don't have enough phlegm in the back. Shechem.
Yeah.
And gave birth to Asenath, which we'll see today. But Jacob's sons wanted to kill the baby, but they didn't.
Interesting.
So, and then she gave birth to this Asenath, a young lady, and then the sons gave her some sort of an amulet to wear, the baby, and Dinah took the baby to Potiphar in Egypt and presented the baby there at the wall, and they took the baby in along with Dinah, and because of the amulet she had on, Potiphar brought her in, gave her a wet nurse, took in Dinah, and then Potiphar's wife was said to be barren, so Potiphar's wife adopted that baby as her own. So
wow, that's a good story.
That's an interesting story, and we'll see why that's important when we get to a little bit later today. So I'm kind of going to zip through a couple chapters because there's not really too much mention of women in them. So in Genesis 35, God told Jacob to go to Bethel, as we said last week, which was where he was supposed to go in the first place. So before this, Jacob told everyone in his camp to get rid of any idols and purify themselves. And remembering that his wife, Rachel, had taken the family idols. So it doesn't say whether or not she got rid of them, but let's assume that she did. Then it's mentioned that Rebecca's, his mother's nurse, died and was buried at a place that was named the Oak of Weeping. So that makes me think that Rebecca may have been traveling with Jacob, because I don't know why else her nurse would be with them, remembering that Jacob is her favorite child. So there's no mention of whether or not she was traveling with them, but it's curious that her nurse was with them. Unless her nurse was just gifted to, or given to them in order to help raise the babies of Jacob's wives. So
yeah, interesting.
Yeah, at this point.
Or maybe it was Rebecca's nurse when she was little.
Possibly.
In the family, you know.
Yeah, and she
Who
just
knows?
travels
with Laban's family. With Laban, she would have been with Laban.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I was asking. Could be.
So this is where, in Genesis 35, is where Jacob's name is changed from Jacob to Israel. Or God says it again, because I really thought it was before that it was changed. So I'll have to look at that again, and I'll catch up with that next week. But it says here, I've now changed your name from Jacob to Israel. And this is the first time that God introduces himself as El Shaddai. So he says, I'm El Shaddai. And it means the nurturing one. And I suppose it's a little controversial, but we're going to go back to Genesis and remember that God said, I have made them in my image, male and female. So another translation of El Shaddai is the many-breasted God, which is interesting. It's just in the context of the God that provides that nourishment for his children. So not to put a gender on God, Jared likes to say that God's not genderless, he's genderful. So he has both genders, male and female. So it might be a little uncomfortable to think of God as possessing the female gender, but he himself says he does. So that's one of the translations for El Shaddai, is the many-breasted one who nurtures the children. Also in this chapter, Jacob is told to be fruitful and multiply, just the same as Adam and Eve in the beginning. And also remembering that being fruitful and multiply doesn't necessarily mean to have children. It means to expand the things that God has entrusted us with. Okay, so he also says that there will be kings among your children, and we know that the King of Kings comes through Jacob. I can't read what I wrote there. Named Bethel, the house of God. So in 16, verse 16, it says Rachel had a hard labor. So while they were traveling to Bethel, Rachel had a hard labor, and she birthed a son, and her nurse said, don't worry, you have another son. And so she named him Ben-Oni, which means son of my sorrow, because she knew she was dying as she's giving birth to this child. And Jacob comes and changes the name to Benjamin, which is son of my right hand. And so she's buried here, and Jacob says, I'm building a pillar so that everyone will remember the woman that I loved. And the pillar is no longer there, but there is still a building there to commemorate the death of Rachel. So in verse 18. Okay, Rachel died and was buried there. She was actually, she was buried on the way to Bethlehem. So she was buried close to Bethlehem, and we all know what happened in Bethlehem. That was where Jesus was born. So Reuben went in verse 22, Reuben went and slept with Bilhah, the father's concubine, remembering that Bilhah was one of the women that were the maidservants of Rachel and Leah, and remembering also that Bilhah means trouble. So, and it just said that he heard of it. Now it refers to Jacob as Israel, and it says he heard of it. He didn't necessarily do anything about it. He just heard about it. And so in here it names all of the sons. So now we have the 12 sons. It says, the Bible says all of the names of the sons and who was the mother. And in verse 28, we read that Isaac was 180 years. And that's when I like this version, because it says the same thing as Jesus. It said Isaac gave up the ghost and died. So that was when Isaac died. So this is Jacob and Esau's son, and it says that both Esau and Jacob buried their father.
So you know that when Reuben went with Bilhah, that he was trying to become the firstborn.
Right. Yes.
He was trying to become like the king, because he knew that his dad was dying. So, he was trying to take the birthright away from Joseph is what he was trying to do. Because he already got dismissed by Jacob by what they did.
Right. Reuben and Simeon.
Jacob,
Reuben and Simeon.
He was trying to insert himself naturally as the firstborn, but even though he was in that family, but he wasn't the firstborn of the beloved, which was Rachel.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Great point. Yeah. And I know that happens also throughout scripture where the son will sleep with the father's either wife, his mother, or the concubine in order
tricky.
Again. Yeah. And it's very interesting. So chapter 36 goes through the generations of Esau, also known as Edom. So I'm gonna scoot through just some of the names. I looked up a lot of the names here, so we're just gonna scoot through some of these names. So Adah means ornament. That was one of Esau's daughters. Esau's wives. These are Esau's wives. So ornament. So remembering again that Esau took multiple wives at the get-go, not like what happened with Jacob where he was tricked into taking multiple wives. So there's Adah, Basmat, which means spice, and Onolabama, which means tent of the high place. So their children, and it's interesting because there's some times when God uses names to tell stories. So I'm just gonna read, I'm not even gonna read the Israel names or the Hebrew names. I'm just going to read the translations of what they are. So these are Esau's children. So the first is friend of God. He hurries to aid the concealed or naked. So that sounds like a story about God. And then there's some more. These are his grandchildren. One of them means south. Tamar means south. Omar means speaker or eloquent. Zepho is watchtower. Gatam is burnt valley. Kanaz is hunter. Timnah is restrained. Amalek is dwelling in a valley. Nahath is rest. Zerah is rising. Shema is astonishment. Mizah is fear. And then it just keeps going. Names all of his children and all of his grandchildren. And I believe that's the last we hear of Esau and his ladies and his family. So in verse 37, again, I'm just going to brush over this. Maybe someday I would love to do a Bible study on Joseph, but that's not what we're doing here today. So in chapter 37, it talks about Joseph having this dream about how even the stars are going to bow to him and he's going to be this great thing. And then because he's a youth and doesn't really have his wits about him and doesn't know when to keep his mouth closed, he goes and tells all of his brothers. And again, he's the firstborn, like Jeanette said, of the beloved Rachel. So his brothers, he already gets the special treatment. His brothers don't like him already. He's given this incredible garment that's the coat of many colors, and there's lots of mysteries behind that, what goes into the garments. There's many garments mentioned in scripture. Garments have certain powers, so he is given the garment of all of the colors. So again, that just makes his brothers angry and not like him. So they take him away. First they were thinking of killing him, then they're like, no, we're not going to kill him. So they sell him into slavery, take his coat of many colors, put blood all over it, take it back to Jacob and say our brother was killed by wild animals, which they're very sad about. Jacob is very sad about. So then Joseph is taken into, this is all, because like I didn't want to get into too much of all of this. Yeah, he's raised up. Oh, here we are. Here's Tamar. Okay, so 38. We'll start at 38. Chapter 38. And it came to pass at that time that Judah went down from his brethren and turned into a certain Adulamite whose name was Harah, which means noble family. So again, this is Judah has found this lady and takes her as his wife. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite named Shua and took her as his wife. Shua means wealth. And she conceived and bore a son named which means awake. And she conceived again, bore a son named Onan, which means strong. And she bore another son named Shelah, which means a petition. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn son, named Tamar. And Judah's firstborn son, was wicked in the sight of God, and God killed him. So Tamar was without a child then, or without a husband, after God killed So Judah said to Onan, so Onan's another of Judah's children, to take this Tamar as his wife, because that was the custom, that if a man died, and again we see this in Jesus's time where the Pharisees try to trip him up and say, let's say this woman is married to this guy and he dies, and then she marries his brother and he dies, and 7 times, and who will be her husband in heaven? And Jesus says, in heaven there's neither marriage or being given to marriage. So, but on earth, the men, if they die, their brother or their next of kin will take the woman as their own, to continue the family line, to produce an heir. So Onan takes her as his wife, and Onan knew that if he impregnated this woman, okay, so Onan knew that if the seed would not be his, so if he impregnated this woman, then it would technically be his brother's offspring and not his own. So as he went into his brother's wife, he spilled his seed on the ground, which God saw was an evil thing to do. So he killed this guy also. God killed this guy also. So the last son, Judah didn't want God to kill his last son. He was still underage. So Tamar was told to go back to her father's house until this young man was of age. The last one was Shelah was the last one, and or Shua. Sorry, I can't read my own writing. No. So Tamar went back to her father's house, and while she's there, it's a hard life so she was told to dress as a widow, and it's a hard life for a childless widow, and she was at the mercy of Judah to find her a new husband, whether it be his youngest son or someone else, because she was now tied to that bloodline. And so she comes up with a plan. So in process of time, so this is verse 12. In process of time, Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, died, and Judah was comforted and went into the sheep shearers, and it was told to Tamar, your father-in-law is going up to shear his sheep. So she took off her garments of widowhood and covered herself with a veil and wrapped herself and sat in the gate of Enim, which was on the way to Timnah, for she saw that Shelah was grown up and she was not given to him as a wife. So she saw that this young man has now grown into adulthood and that Judah had not presented her to him as a wife. So she came up with a plan and sits here with her face covered, which at this time now means that she was a harlot. So, oh, these birds are very loud today. So she covers her face to conceal her identity, and that's what the prostitutes of the time would do. And recalling back before, that the veil was also used for the women to show modesty during their engagement. So he comes by and sees what he believes is a prostitute, verse 16, and he turned to her and said, come on, let's go have some sex. So he didn't know that she was his daughter-in-law. And so she says to him, well, what will you give me if I'm going to do this? And he said, I'll give you the kid of the goats from the flock. So he's going to give her a goat. And she said, will you give me a pledge until you're able to send it? And he said, what should I give you? And she said, give me your signet, your cord, and your staff, which again, there's tons of layers of what those are. So the signet is like the sealed ring that they would wear, the ring of the family.
Why would he give her all that?
I have no idea. I have no idea why he would give her these important things. And I'm sure the cord is something important and the staff is something important.
They're out his identity. Like anybody that has them can use it. It's like going to the bank.
Yes. Yep. Here, take my ATM card and my PIN number and my social security. Right. Just
here's my passport. Here's my keys to my car.
Right. Yep. Just to have a good time with this lady. So and
he didn't miss it for 3 months.
Right.
She ran off with it for 3 months.
Right.
Like, okay.
Yep. So then after that, and she conceived during this. So after this, she rose up and went away and put off her veil and put back on her garments of widowhood. And Judah sent the kid of the goats with this dude, a Dulamite, to receive his items back from this woman, but he couldn't find her. Then he asked the men, saying, "Where's the prostitute that was at this place?" And everybody said, "There's no prostitute here." So he returned and said, "I haven't found her." And Judah said, "Let's take it to her." Oh yeah, and then she found out that Tamar played the harlot in verse 24, and moreover she was with child. So Judah says, "Bring her forth and let's set her on fire." So that's nice. So she was brought forth by her father-in-law, and the man, and then she says, "Here I am with child," and discern, whose are these? This signet and this cord and this staff. So Judah acknowledged these items and recognized that he was just as guilty as she was. And so I guess he decided not to set her on fire, which that's nice.
That was nice.
So yeah, so because he said, so she is more righteous than I, for I have not given her Shelah, my son. And and then he no longer slept with her, and it came to pass that she had twins in her womb. So the midwife, she's having a baby, and one child stuck his hand out, and the midwife tied a scarlet thread around his hand, saying this child came out first. But then the child withdrew his hand back in, and his brother came out before him, and he was named Perez, which means breach. So I would assume he was a breech baby, which I'm sure was extremely painful at the time. And afterward, his brother came out with the scarlet thread around his hand, and he was called Zerah, which means rising. And after that, we hear no more of Tamar. So that was the main focus of today's story, was Tamar. I know we went through a whole bunch of lineage with Esau and some other things, but Tamar was the main focus. So just thinking about how she was, and how that must have felt for her to have her first husband was wicked in the sight of the Lord. So he was probably a pretty wicked man and probably didn't treat her very well. And then her second husband was basically just having sex for his own pleasure and then spilling the seed on the ground. So she wasn't remembering, again, that when Sarah had children, she said that I would be given joy in my old age. So the joy of children for these women, that's where they found their joy, was in having these children. So she was robbed of that from her second husband, Onan. And then the third husband she was supposed to be given, and then Judah didn't give her this this man. So again, we're going to see that Jesus comes through this lineage, and it's such a wonderful testament to grace and mercy. So grace is when I don't receive the punishment that I deserve, and mercy is when I'm given something on top of it. So not only did I not go to jail for robbery, I've been given this wonderful gift instead. So it's just a testament to God's grace and mercy, choosing these people to send his son through. And that's the conclusion of today's study.